Hello there, everyone. So today we are going to talk about natural disasters in Asia, um, and really getting the core of three things: typhoons, earthquakes and tsunamis, and volcanoes. And in Asia, much of Asia, and certain parts of South America, but really Asia, we see a very high occurrence of these, especially some of the larger ones. And there is a reason for that. We call this area the Ring of Fire. This is a hyperactive area of the planet in which we get typhoons and earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis. Excuse me. And one of the reasons for that is you have all of these different tectonic plates that are rubbing together, pushing on one another, slipping, lots of access to magma for volcanoes, and we just get a lot of action here. For instance, over there by the Nazca Plate, the largest earthquake in the history of the world occurred down there in Chile. We had Mount St. Helens eruptions in Washington in the United States of America. You have volcanoes that are that are in the Caribbean and in Central America, but really the big ones we're going to talk about in Asia because we have some real historic things that occur. So the first thing we'll talk about a typhoon. So a typhoon is basically it's like a hurricane. It's just in the Pacific. That's the only really difference ones. But these really since 1975 on, some of these get very large. And the largest one, and just to give you an idea of the damage level that we're looking at here, is Typhoon Tip. So on the right is the size that Typhoon Tip was. This thing was 1,380 miles wide. Okay, it's absolutely insane. And the thing is, it's the time. This thing started on October 4th, 1979, and then finally ended on October 24th, 1979. So you're looking at this just monster storm with massive winds that basically hit everything from South Pacific islands like Guam, moving up through Okinawa. The fringes of it were hitting China, did heavy damage in Japan, before it finally took a right-hand turn out to the rest of the mid-Pacific and dissipated. So this thing is massive, okay? It had sustained winds of 305 miles per hour. And the rainfall numbers were crazy. Actually, at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, they got 23 inches of rain. 23 inches of rain. The coasts of Japan and China just got absolutely battered here. You see, we don't really have much pictures of Typhoon Tip as much as I try, but these are some more current pictures of a typhoon after it hit. The infrastructure, actually, there was one boat in China. It literally was a massive, big tanker ship, and it snapped it in half. That's how powerful the seas were. Sea walls and dams are destroyed. Infrastructure is destroyed. Cropland is washed away. 99 people were killed. Thousands were injured. And we actually don't have, they didn't calculate the damage. It's basically incalculable. You would think tens of billions of dollars in today's modern money. And this is something that happens with fair regularity in this area. And a lot of these storms are getting more and more powerful, and something that we have to be aware of. But really, the big thing that I want to talk about are tsunamis and earthquakes, and this is what in recent years has done some of the biggest damage. So basically, what happens is you get an underwater earthquake. Now, this area does get powerful, regular earthquakes, don't get me wrong, but the problem is this part of the world, with all those plates, you get these big shifts, okay, of plates rubbing up against each other, and massive energy is released into the water, causing a tsunami. Now, basically what a tsunami is a series, as you can see here, of very long waves. And when they're in deep water, you actually don't even know they're there. You could actually be in the middle of the ocean and a tsunami pass underneath you. You wouldn't have any idea that it was there. But when they get to the shore, and as you can see here, the water is no longer deep, that energy pushes up and you get massive waves. And when I say massive waves, I mean waves that can be 100 to 120 feet tall. And the thing is they hit and they just keep coming, and that energy keeps flowing in. And so they just drive everything back and can flow with water miles inland. So yes, the size of the waves are big, but it's just the wave, it just hits and it just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming, and it doesn't stop. And so there's two that I'm going to talk about. So the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Okay, so this hit on Christmas in 2004, and it's a massive earthquake that hits right off the coast of Indonesia, anywhere from 9.1 to 9.3 on the scale. But the crazy part is it lasted for 10 minutes. Okay, and normally earthquakes are well less than a minute long. The total energy released, this is what always blows my mind. The total energy released is equal of the amount of energy that the United States would use for the next 370 years. Or it was 550 million times more energy than the atomic bomb that was dropped at Hiroshima. And it actually was so powerful, it shook the planet. The planet actually moved about a half an inch, and some of the waves were recorded of over 30 meters tall. And that is a little idea of a wave of how big that would actually be. Look at your kind of standard house. Look at a multi-story building. That's what 30 meters looks like. And here's the problem. There was no early warning system. One of the reasons why this will result in so many people dying is that in the Pacific Ocean, we have lots of earthquakes and we have volcanoes. And so we have these buoys that are all over the Pacific Ocean. So if there is an abnormal amount of energy detected and wave abnormalities, they're able to relay that information, and we can get people away from coasts so we don't have people, dead. In the Indian Ocean, they didn't have it, so they didn't know what was coming. The breadth of the damage, let's look. So you look at Indonesia, Thailand, Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Madagascar, South Africa, all sustained serious damage. Okay. When it was all done, 230,000 people were killed by these tsunami waves and the flooding, and 1.7 million people were displaced. And there, if you want to pause it, you can see the amount of people that were killed, missing, and then how many people were displaced. Meaning that their homes were destroyed. And they're still rebuilding from that. It was 16 years ago, or almost 16 years ago, but we're still working on it. The Earth's axis is slightly different now, and much of the seafloor of the Indian Ocean now has to be remapped because the earthquake caused a huge upthrust of land that basically we have to remap it. And here is just some destruction. You can see the floodwaters coming in. This picture always gets me. So this was a picture in January 10th of 2003 in Indonesia. And then on the right there, December 29th, 2004. So about 4 days after it hit and the floodwaters recede, as you can see, everything is gone. And then here's another great picture of submerged coastline. Here's another area of Indonesia. And look, all this gone, underwater, gone. Now, the thing about that is many of the areas that it did hit of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami were areas that were underdeveloped, didn't have seawall protection, and so a lot of people attributed the damage to the fact that these were areas that weren't ready for it. Well, when Mother Nature wants to drop a hammer, she doesn't care who you are, and we learned that in the 2011 Japanese earthquake and tsunami that hit, that devastates one of the most advanced nations in the world, and that is in Japan. So in 2011, right off the coast, there was a magnitude 9.0 quake, causes a massive tsunami. Actually, some of those waves go the entirety of the Pacific and come up on, U.S. Warning system was triggered. They didn't cause any damage, but that's how far the waves could go. 95,000 people were killed, 18,000 people were missing and probably presumed dead. Japan, this earthquake was so strong that Japan was moved 22 feet closer to the United States of America. So think about that. And look, you can see here, this is what I talk about, these floodwaters coming over and then just driving everything. Look at the vans that it's picked up and throwing. You can see these boats are about to get chucked all over the place. Okay, this is what's left. This is after the floodwaters recede again in one of the most modern nations in the world. If I pop back to this picture, there is this is splashing over a seawall. So this is like a 15 to 20 foot high wall that's supposed to protect them. Boom, nothing. No chance. No chance at all. What was also bad about this is it also caused a massive nuclear disaster. Not quite as bad as Chernobyl, but not too far off. Basically, the quake and tsunami are going to cause massive reactor failures at Fukushima nuclear plant. They were hit with 14-meter waves, which was able to breach their seawalls. As a result, it caused 3 separate meltdowns and 3 separate explosions, and resulted in the evacuation of 154,000 residents at a minimum radius of 20 kilometers. So this was no joke. Okay, this just gives you an idea of what it looked like before the tsunami and then the destruction after the nuclear explosions occurred. Basically, the impact was huge. Now, on the right here, you see actually how much radiation got released. Some of that radiation does and still is in the ocean right now. But the biggest problem was massive amounts of radioactive water that ends up getting, or basically polluting, the Pacific Ocean. That was the big problem. It actually was continuing to be released into the ocean for 3 years after the disaster. And some of that radiation and that radiated water, cesium is one of the big elements involved in that. And we have elevated cesium levels off the coast of Alaska, Northern California. Absolutely devastating. So the radiation was reaching basically everywhere. It is believed to be that this won't be officially fully cleaned up for 30 to 40 years, and that some of it was avoidable. There have been some safety checks done in 2008 about expanding their seawalls and other protections. Those were not done, and as a result, there were massive lawsuits. And when it's all said and done, the company is probably going to have to pay out around 7 trillion yen, or 6.5 trillion US dollars. Okay, and there's an example of the radiation plume that was coming out as a result. And that is a year afterwards. The other big and spectacular thing are volcanic eruptions. And the one that I'm going to talk about is the Krakatau eruption that occurred in 1883. It is the most cataloged eruption in history. So much has been written about it. This volcanic eruption was 13,000 times the size of Little Boy in Nagasaki. There were 162 villages killed and 162 villages destroyed. 36,000 people dead, and tsunamis actually impacted areas as far away as South Africa, from where Krakatau is at in Indonesia, that were 120 feet high. Now, what we need to understand about, massive eruptions have altered our planet. Probably the most famous and what we consider to be the largest eruption perhaps in history was the Lake Toba eruption, which is also in this region. Now, then it was Mount Toba, but the entire island actually exploded. The volcano exploded, making a lake. So much stuff was sent into the air that it basically sent the world into what we would call a nuclear winter. And this is tens of thousands of years ago. And the hypothesis here is actually humankind almost got wiped out. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that humankind was almost completely destroyed by the Lake Toba eruption. But Krakatau taught us what can happen with a volcano. On August 24th, 1883, the eruption begins, and we start to see plumes of smoke, and then 3 days later, it explodes. So this is not kind of this bubbly eruption. This is massive, exploding volcano. Actually, Krakatau was 3 peaks at that time, and so you're looking at just massive, massive explosion. It was so big that they could hear the explosion, and we have records of this on the islands of Mauritius. That's across the Indian Ocean. Mauritius is about 3,350 miles away. I'm actually going to show you a map in a minute. So imagine sitting here in New Jersey. I live in New Jersey, okay? And I'm sitting here in New Jersey, and I go out, and I hear a noise, and I'm like, I wonder what that noise is. And then I find out later in the day that the noise came from Los Angeles. That's what we're talking about. The pressure of that explosion in the atmosphere could actually be measured around the entire world for 5 days. Okay, if you were within 30 miles of the explosion, you died. There, again, not a single survivor in a 30-mile radius of the explosion, not a single survivor was found. It also caused tsunamis as far away as South Africa, and that is 5,554 miles away. And so much ash and debris was pushed into the atmosphere that they dropped the average temperature of the world by 2 degrees. What that resulted in is in the northern hemisphere, we basically had no summer. There was snow in late August and September, massive crop failures, and erratic weather really for the next 2 years. And actually, most skies in the northern hemisphere, because of the ash that was still in it, would be red, deep red sunsets for 2 years. So the destructive power is really unrivaled. And here is Krakatau today, because guess what? It rebuilt itself. It is still an active volcano. You can see here this. So look at it this way. So here is Krakatau. These are little islands that was left. So back in 1883, imagine all this in a circle. This was all one big island with 3 different peaks, and now it's all gone and basically exploded up into the atmosphere. Just absolutely remarkable. And here is our map, understanding how far we're going. So again, this is this line here. The top line is the sound carry line. So here's Mauritius, here's Krakatau. Okay, and then this line's a little off, but so Krakatau right here, and then that's the tsunami distance, 5,554 miles, 3,350 miles for sound. Absolutely staggering. And so this is why in this area, definitely more prone to these types of things. Hopefully you learned a little bit, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.